Being an electrician wasn't about classroom learning for me. I excelled at the practical aspects of the trade. After high school, I started my apprenticeship, becoming a journeyman electrician 4 years later. By 24, I had my master's license. Not that I lacked intelligence, but I preferred hands-on work to textbook study. I wanted to start my own business, but Claire preferred the stability of my job at Alpha Electrical Contractors. We had a young daughter, April, and with Claire staying home, my job provided a comfortable life. House and cars were paid off, we took vacations, and bills were never a concern. I thought we were happy. My best friend since grade school, Tom, a successful businessman with a Stanford degree and an MBA, often joined us for dinner. He made more money, but he was single. He often expressed envy for my family life, reminding me, money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy love. I always agreed. I loved Claire, and April was my world. We were close. I even taught April some basic electrical work, though I hoped she'd pursue a different career path. Then, in August, my world imploded. Arriving home from work, I saw Tom's car in the driveway. Not unusual. He often came for dinner. Normally, April would greet me at the door, but she was absent. "Where's April?" I asked Claire. "She's at Danielle's house," Claire replied. Both she and Tom wore strange expressions, a sign that something was wrong. "We need to talk," Claire announced. My heart sank. I'd just come from a hot, sweaty job and needed a shower. "Give me a minute to clean up," I said, heading upstairs. In the shower, my mind raced. Was Claire pregnant? We hadn't discussed having more children, but it had been a few weeks since we'd been intimate, and the timing seemed plausible. That might explain her anxiousness. I would have welcomed another child. But why was Tom involved? Maybe Claire had confided in him first to gauge my reaction. I considered other possibilities. Was someone seriously ill? I had no other family. My father had died in a car accident when I was 11, and my mother had passed away 10 years later. Their divorce, fueled by my mother's infidelity and my father's inability to cope, had cast a long shadow over my childhood. Maybe the issue was with Claire's parents, or her sister Liz. I even fleetingly considered if something was wrong with Claire or Tom, but I reasoned I would have known sooner. With no other clues, I went downstairs, ready to face whatever news awaited me. When I joined them in the living room, I didn't register the fact that Claire and Tom were sitting together on the couch, while I sat alone on the love seat. Claire began by expressing her appreciation for me, but it quickly devolved into a confession. She and Tom had fallen in love. She wanted a divorce. It felt like a punch to the gut. I was speechless, struggling to process her words. Claire continued, hoping we could handle the situation amicably, for April's sake, minimizing disruption to her life. When I finally found my voice, I asked if she'd slept with him. Her wry smile and answer were like a knife twisting in my gut. "Of course I have, Andy." I was reeling, trying to make sense of it all. We'd been together for over 20 years, more than half our lives. I'd always believed we were happy, that any issues we had could be resolved. Now, I was grasping for answers, wondering where it had all gone so wrong. Tom's attempt to speak was what finally snapped me out of my stupor. "Andy, look." "No," I roared, surprising myself with the force of my voice. "You're never speaking to me again, you backstabbing son of a bitch. Let me make this clear, Tom. If you ever say another word to me, I will kill you, and I'll gladly spend the rest of my life in prison for it. Nod if you understand." He nodded. Tom was all suit and no substance. He knew I could break him in half. "There's no need to act like this, Andy. Let's try to be civil, please," Claire interjected. "It is necessary for me to act like this. And this is me being civil. I'm the one being betrayed and trampled on, so screw you and your ideas about how I should react." I spat at her. "And I'm taking custody of my little girl, not you. Andy, I understand you're upset, but I'm not giving up custody of April. We can work out a reasonable visitation schedule so you can spend time with her, but she's staying with us, so her life can remain as normal as possible. You work long hours. I'm still at home." I was on a roll. You don't understand a damn thing. She's my kid too. I haven't spent the last 18 years busting my ass to support my family just to become a part-time dad because the woman I married decided to trade up for someone with a fatter wallet. I guess that's why none of your other girlfriends ever worked out, I added. He's apparently had his eye on you for a while. This isn't about money, Andy, she retorted. The truth is, we never should have gotten married. I thought I loved you, but we were just kids. I married you because we'd been together for so long and everyone expected it. I tried to be a good wife, but as I got older, I realized there was more for me out there. And I found it with Tom. We didn't mean for this to happen. He was just always around, and we clicked. Honestly, we're surprised you never noticed how well we got along. That's when I noticed you were holding hands, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I just had faith in my wife and my best friend, clearly misplaced faith. It never occurred to me that the two people I cared about most would betray me like this. You've done enough already. If you fight me on custody, the gloves come off. Got it? Then I guess the gloves are off, Andy, Claire replied coldly. I'm sorry you feel that way. This could have been handled much more easily. Whatever, I retorted. I'm sorry I'm making your betrayal harder than you'd like. You witch. You two need to get the hell out of my house. I'm not leaving the house I worked my ass off to pay for just because you think I'm not good enough anymore, Claire snapped. I'm sure Mr. Moneybags can put you up in his bachelor pad. Fine, she retorted. I already have most of my stuff at his place anyway. That stung. I'll just grab a few more things, then we'll go. For what it's worth, Andy. I'm sorry, she said, but they were already out of earshot. Nothing you say means anything anymore, I muttered. I sat silently on the couch while they packed for about 30 minutes. Tom left with a suitcase and Claire followed, pausing briefly at the door before leaving without a word. When April got home, I explained what had happened, avoiding any negativity about her mother or Uncle Tom. I believed in my bond with April, confident she would choose to stay with me. At 14, she had a significant voice in custody arrangements, and I trusted her love for me. I hired a lawyer, prepared to fight, though he warned me the laws weren't in my favor. Alimony seemed likely, at least until Claire and Tom married. Child support depended on where April chose to live, but I felt certain I wouldn't have to pay. At the hearing 3 weeks later, Claire waived alimony, citing Tom's higher income and their impending marriage. I avoided looking at her throughout the proceedings. The judge spent an hour interviewing April, who emerged in tears. I assumed she felt guilty about choosing me. The judge granted the divorce, finalized in 120 days. Claire waived alimony and any claim to our joint savings, which I retained. Custody, however, was awarded to Claire, allowing April to remain in the same school and environment. I was stunned. April had chosen Claire. I'd misjudged everything, believing my family truly cared about me. It felt like a repeat of my parents' divorce, used and discarded now that a better option, in Tom, had appeared. The judge's pronouncements about equity, child support, and visitation were a blur. I could only focus on the betrayal. My lawyer tried to reassure me, but his words were meaningless. I wandered into the hallway in a daze, vaguely aware of April hugging me, whispering, "Daddy." I couldn't respond. The betrayal, Claire, Tom, even April, felt absolute. I had no one left. Claire approached, her expression pitying. "You'll still see April, Andy. This is for the best." Tom, wisely, kept his distance. "I guess you won, and I lost," I said. "I'll be out by the end of the week." Thinking I meant leaving the house, she replied, "There's no rush, Andy. We can stay at the condo as long as you need. I really hope we can all get through this and learn to get along. You still mean a lot to me." I turned to face her, my voice raw with anger. "Don't give me that crap. If I meant anything to you, this wouldn't have happened. Like I said, I'll be gone by the end of the week. Take your daughter and leave me the hell alone." "She's our daughter, Andy," Claire insisted. "She'll see you next weekend." "No," I growled. "She made her choice. She chose you. Goodbye, Claire." I walked out without looking back. After the hearing, Tom listed his condo, anticipating a quick sale. He'd already packed most of his belongings, ready to move into the house Andy and I shared once Andy left. Our goal was to maintain stability for April. Since Tom's condo was in a different school district, moving there wasn't an option. Tom and I hadn't planned this. We'd fallen in love despite our best intentions, despite not wanting to hurt Andy. Our first intimate encounter happened when Andy was working an overnight job, a confirmation that we were meant to be together. We met secretly twice more before telling Andy. My feelings for Tom deepened during those 2 weeks. It was difficult to refuse Andy's advances, but my loyalty now belonged to Tom. We knew Andy would be hurt, but we hoped he'd eventually understand. We hadn't anticipated his reaction. He only communicated through his lawyer. He was supposed to pick up April at 4:00 p.m., but by 4:30 he hadn't shown up. His phone was disconnected, and I couldn't reach his lawyer. Worried, I took April to the house. It looked deserted. Andy's belongings were gone, but April's room was untouched. On the kitchen counter, I found a cashier's check for Andy's child support payments, covering the amount until April graduated high school. A knock on the door startled me. I hoped it was Andy, but it was Mrs. Perrin, our neighbor. Andy hasn't been around for days, she informed me. He emptied the house, piled everything on the lawn. A Salvation Army truck picked it all up, probably the day after your divorce hearing. I asked if he'd left a forwarding address. Mrs. Perrin asked April to step outside. A sense of dread washed over me. He said if you asked where he was, to tell you he'd see you in hell. Tears streamed down my face. A red light on the way to work, totaling my truck and causing a pileup. Jaws of life, hospital, full checkup. Melody and her parents met me there. 6 hours of tests, then released. Doctor's orders, rest for 2 days, no driving for a week. Melody stayed home to care for me. By Saturday, I was itching to get back to the bar. I overheard Melody making plans to go out, so I asked her to drop me off at the bar, pretending I wanted to check on the progress. Sales that night were double the usual take, thanks to the new cook. We were sold out. We'd even started attracting a lunch crowd, with daily specials tied to the bar's theme. The restaurant closed at 8:00 p.m., with pickled eggs and sausages available afterward. An energetic, though elderly retired gentleman had approached me about a partnership, setting up his own kitchen in the bar and asking for 10% of the profits. His homemade shepherd's pie and Irish stew were a hit, and we'd needed to hire more kitchen staff. Around 8:30 p.m., Carrie and Lazar arrived with Susan. Carrie looked stunning in a green Irish-themed dress. They sat at a table, enjoying the live folk music. I sent over a round of drinks. On the house. "Hey, Caleb," Carrie called out. "Thanks for remembering what we like. This is my friend Susan." I shook Susan's hand as she excused herself briefly to order a ginger ale. I maintained my no-drinking policy at my own bar. Back at the table, Carrie moved to the seat next to me. Susan seemed unfazed. "Just wanted to announce this before the others arrive," Carrie said to Susan. "Caleb is Melody's ex-husband." "Really?" Susan exclaimed, surprised. "Yeah," I confirmed. "We met when I was scoping out the competition while my bar was being renovated. Carrie caught me red-handed, and after we talked, I gave her a ride home. We've been friends ever since." "He had no clue about his wife's affair," Carrie explained. "That's why we're here. We wanted to make sure he wasn't alone." "Why this place?" Susan asked. "It has a reputation for being classy," I chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment. Wasn't my intention, though. I just wanted a nice place to bring my girlfriend." "Caleb not only built this bar," Carrie added, "he owns it." Carrie and I exchanged glances at Susan's surprised expression. The bar filled up, and when Carrie's friends arrived, our table was packed. Carrie and Susan kept me on the dance floor all night, much to the amusement of my staff, who remarked on the full house. The music was just right, loud enough to enjoy, but not so loud as to prevent conversation. I asked Carrie for a ride home. She commented that her friends preferred my bar because it wasn't a typical college meat market. This pleased me. Word of mouth was working. Waking up Sunday to find Melody gone wasn't unusual. I spent 2 hours trying to locate her, pretending to be concerned, calling her family, even talking to Carrie. As I was speaking with her, my former father-in-law called. "Hey, Dad, still no word?" "No, Caleb," he replied, his voice heavy with worry. "That's why I'm calling. Mary and I decided to have brunch at the Rada Inn, and we wish we hadn't. Melody's car is here. My truck's out of commission, Dad. Can't make it. You guys enjoy. Catch up later," I said, feigning concern. My ex-father-in-law, Daniel, was a man of strong principles, seeing things in black and white. He questioned Anderson Cooper's version of the truth. He was surprised I didn't have tattoos, but I valued self-respect. Our society, I'd argued with him once, prioritizes self-interest over community. We often debated law and order, responsibility versus irresponsibility. Racist has become a political weapon, I'd told him. If Napoleon were alive today, he'd applaud their tactics. To them, anyone who disagreed was branded a racist, an enemy, subject to harassment and attacks. They're infiltrating cities, masked, imposing their version of social justice, I'd argued. They only want to hear their own rhetoric, even though leaders promise investigations and consequences. We both know nothing will happen. Equal justice is dead. It'll get worse before it gets better, he'd agreed, like Napoleon's rise to power. History repeating itself. One political party reintroducing such divisive rhetoric. It felt like the pre-Civil War era. This is our world now, Dad, I'd concluded. If Daniel caught Melody with Payne, things could get ugly. I texted Carrie the information about Melody's car and the photo of the text to her sister. "What are you up to?" she'd replied, laughing. Besides smiling, I'd answered, "Not much. Want to come get me? Hang out?" she'd offered. I wanted to, but I couldn't just disappear, given the circumstances. Around 6 p.m., Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. He was alone and looked defeated. I ushered him inside. I poured him a Maker's Mark and offered him pizza. "Dad, it's bad," he began. "After your call, I talked to Mandy to confirm my suspicions. I asked the day manager to alert the night manager. Turns out Melody's been at it for over 6 months. Mandy knew and kept quiet, thinking Melody wanted to experiment before settling down. I pretended to be shocked, but Mandy's honesty surprised me. As I was leaving, Melody showed up. With him, smug grin, like he'd won a trophy. I almost passed out. Took both managers to restrain me. "Came here because I figured it's the last place the cops would look," he confessed. "I'll call Mom, let her know you're safe. Then I'll talk to the manager about pressing charges." Mary was relieved, but devastated. Melody called to apologize, but her mother shut her down. "Your apology means nothing, Melody. You've caused enough trouble." I called Jason to settle our $5 bet. He joked about Carrie. She never forgets. He suggested I pay him in front of her. "Why?" I asked. "It'll save us both trouble. She needs closure," he explained. I assured him I was still married and wouldn't make any decisions until the divorce was final. I'd be careful. He told me the police hadn't been involved and Payne wasn't pressing charges, thanks to Melody. Relieved, I told Daniel, then Mary, seeing the relief on his face. "What are you going to do?" he asked, worried. I showed him the draft of my text to Melody. "Dad just told me everything. Congratulations. You've destroyed our family. Don't come home. The Melody I knew is gone. If you choose him, it's over. Otherwise, it's a slow, painful end." I meant it. Trust is fragile. "Let's end this with dignity," he said, sending the message. Mary always said Melody had married her father. This proved it. After pizza and drinks, we installed new deadbolts. Mandy, Jack, and Mary arrived with the kittens. They left around 10 p.m. I texted Carrie, "Up?" She called back, "You okay?" Jason called. "Payne has 2 black eyes and a broken nose," I chuckled. "Your father-in-law. He's a force of nature. He used to box, I explained. Wish I'd seen it. He came here afterward distraught, I said. Jason told me no charges were filed, so I updated everyone. They'd already gathered. What about Melody? Carrie asked. I recounted the conversation with Daniel in the text message. Let's end this with dignity, he said, and sent it. He spoke for you? No forgiveness? No second chance? No. For him, trust is broken. He sees things in black and white. She made her bed. Consequences. I agree with him, I stated. He even helped me change the locks. Any news on last night? Haven't checked. Been busy, I said. Doesn't matter now anyway. I'll wait till Monday, she promised. Might surprise you, though. How? The bartender. He has a side hustle in certain types of videos, Carrie chuckled. Wouldn't surprise me if he took advantage of the situation. Seriously? I asked. Absolutely. But when's our official first date? How about the day Melody's served? I grinned. I'll even have her served at the office. Just make sure you send red roses first. I want her to know she betrayed my standards. Tomorrow at work should be interesting, Carrie mused. I thought about Carrie after we hung up. 24, single, attractive, 5'8", curvy. Worked for the same dental company, but not in management. Close to her family and friends. Enjoyed dancing, drinking, like me. But she was also cautious, reserved, more educated than her job suggested. Getting ready for bed, I hummed Carrie Ann. Anticipating a challenging Monday, I asked my assistant to cover the bar while I handled personal matters. Mandy arrived in Jack's truck to help pack Melody's things. We bought packing supplies. We started with the master bedroom. And wardrobe boxes, Mandy started sorting through the dresser drawers. Caleb, she remarked, I'm appalled by my sister's behavior. I never approved and kept hoping she'd come to her senses. When Dad told me about your message, I broke down and told him everything. She'd only known for a month. He took it as a personal failure, like he hadn't raised her right. I think Mom feels the same. Mandy, I'm still processing all this, I admitted. The night Melody texted you, I saw it accidentally. I was at the bar scouting the competition. I just wanted proof for a confrontation. I never meant for it to blow up like this. I really regret it. Did you ever tell her the bar had been robbed and was closed? She asked. I did, but looking back, I think she heard but didn't listen. Should have realized it was her way of signaling the end, I reflected. Melody had always been shielded by her father, as had I. Mandy believed I needed the experience of fatherhood to understand the sacrifices he'd made. I was trying to instill those same values in my children. Melody, even as a child, had a distorted sense of right and wrong. That hadn't changed, and I wished I'd recognized it sooner. I think about your parents often, I admitted to Mandy. Few can call their father-in-law a close friend. Reaching Melody's lingerie, Mandy asked for sewing scissors. I handed them to her. Before packing the items, she cut out the crotch of the panties and between the cups of the bras. A message to her sister, perhaps. The mutilated garments went into a box. I was grateful. I couldn't have brought myself to do it. 4 hours later, we were halfway done. I suggested lunch before we continued. Mandy agreed, taking me to a new Chinese buffet called Yumi. The selection was impressive. We arrived as the lunch rush was ending, and there was Payne, leaving. 2 black eyes, broken nose, swollen lips. My father-in-law had left his mark. Mandy, she exclaimed, your father did that? 2 months to heal, I said. Someone told me Dad only hit him 3 times. From the looks of it, your dad still packs a wallop, I remarked, surprising Mandy. If they hadn't stopped him, would Payne be in the hospital? Hard to say, I replied, getting out of the car. As we approached the entrance, Payne reappeared, trying to convince Mandy to get Melody to talk to him. Payne, meet my brother-in-law Caleb, Mandy said. I stepped forward. Payne paled, recognizing me as the driver of Melody's car. He raised his fist. If that's what you want, Payne, I said. Mandy's my witness. She nodded. I kicked him in the groin, then punched him. Twice in the face, then a flurry of blows until he dropped. One last punch for good measure. Feeling a sense of release, I escorted Mandy inside. We ordered drinks, unsweetened tea for me, cola for her. Before we eat, she asked, did my dad teach you those moves? Not exactly. Occupational hazard, dealing with unruly customers, I explained. I didn't want to fight. I wanted it over quickly. As we filled our plates, my phone rang. Melody. I ignored it. I think her boyfriend already called, I quipped. Too bad he won't be performing anytime soon. Mandy burst out laughing, drawing stares. Note to self, no more jokes in public with Mandy. That was hilarious. I almost peed. Glad you didn't, I teased. How would you explain that to Jack? Flash flood, she joked. Stop, she laughed. We finished packing and unloaded everything at a storage unit. I paid the first month's rent and deposit, texting Melody the information. My insurance company lowballed me on my truck, so I requested a comparable replacement. It would cost them more. Back home, Carrie and Susan were waiting. I introduced them to Mandy as Melody's colleagues. Mandy updated Jack on the situation, and we all had a beer. We came to check on you, Carrie said. And see if you wanted to join us for dinner, Susan added. Several people had a rough day. Payne was injured this morning, hospitalized this afternoon. Melody was apartment hunting. Can't say I'm shedding any tears, Mandy remarked. I packed Melody's underwear for her, Caleb. Easy access for her future. Conquests. I notified Payne's company about their affair, Carrie said. Attached a photo of Payne's face, post-father-in-law intervention. Made it clear their affair was unacceptable. Do you hate my sister? Mandy asked Carrie. No, I hate her behavior. In my family, actions have consequences, she replied. They got away with it for too long. I took a call from the bar. Later, Carrie filled me in. So, I asked Carrie, how long have you been in love? With Caleb? Mandy asked, surprised. Since the night we met, Carrie admitted. He found out about his wife's affair, but he controlled his anger. He deflated her tires instead of confronting her. Didn't want me involved. Considerate. Willing to take the heat himself. We talked that night. He never badmouthed Melody. Just wanted proof to explain to her father why she didn't want kids. Caleb's always been the peacemaker, Mandy agreed, even when he's hurting. I approve, Carrie, Mandy said. But if you hurt him... When your dad found out about Melody and Payne, he came to Caleb, Carrie revealed. Did you know he sent the text that ended the marriage? No. That explains why they didn't discuss reconciling, Mandy said. Call Jack and the kids. Meet us at the bar, I instructed Mandy. Dinner for everyone, including Susan and Carrie. I need to change. When I returned, Mandy was gone, Susan was in the kitchen, and Carrie had cleaned up. I like your soon-to-be ex-sister-in-law, Carrie said, smiling. We'll be good friends. The feeling's mutual, I replied, returning her hug. We shared a look, a silent spark. We walked to the car, hand in hand, smiling at Susan. Carrie drove. I sat in the back, anticipation building. Slow and steady, Carrie said, as Susan commented on our pace. Small steps. I want to be a stay-at-home mom, with a husband who shares my values. Mandy's kids greeted us enthusiastically. She remarked on my connection with her daughters. I needed more bar stools. Mandy parked Jack's truck at his store. The shepherd's pie was a hit. Carrie shared her bread pudding with me. She tasted my drink, surprised it wasn't alcoholic. Teasing? She whispered. Made a promise. No drinking at my own bar, before opening, I explained. Her eyes teared up. She looked proud. My assistant reported excellent sales, over $1,000 from food alone. I paid with my debit card, setting an example. Not everyone agrees, Carrie commented, but it adds up. I left a generous tip. Susan and Carrie drove me home. I found an email with a video from Jack the bartender, documenting Saturday night, surviving university night, featuring Melody and Payne. legally documented, for sale on an adult site. I forwarded the link to Carrie, adding that Melody would ensure her parents never saw it. Carrie arrived later, transformed. "Wow," I managed, stunned. "Who are you?" "Do you like it?" She twirled. "Permanent makeover. Your message gave me the perfect cover." "I've been undercover for the FDA, investigating Richard's dental supply," she revealed. "They're selling contaminated materials from China, laundering the source through shell companies. Most buyers are unknowingly using lead-tainted products. Payne's a predator, Reggie, a danger to Melody. Then you came along and distracted him." "Susan, too?" "Yes. College accounting buddies," Carrie explained. "Before we continue, I need you to send that video to my FBI contact. New City Jack's bartender. Similar side hustle as Melody and Payne. Your intel could help." We sent the information. Wine for Carrie, beer for me. Her phone rang. My mother. Speakerphone. "Hi, Mom. Looks like you got my message." "You really quit the FDA?" "Yep. Susan and I are wrapping things up, starting our own firm. We'll testify, but staying local. We've been wanting you to settle down. Why now?" "Mom," Carrie laughed. "Why did you move back home?" Okay. I met someone interesting enough to consider it. Is this the Caleb?" "Mom, goodbye." Carrie hung up. "Empty nest syndrome," I joked. "Divorce lawyer tomorrow. Susan and I resigned from Richards. FDA raids Wednesday. They want us out before the warrants, though they know where to look." She left around 1:00 a.m. Tuesday, I dealt with the insurance company, then met with the divorce lawyer. She wanted proof, so I told her everything, playing the recording of my conversation with Daniel. I also had the RADA in records. "This helps if Hester agrees to my terms," I explained. "A family," I corrected gently. "But there will also be times when it's just me and Sheila." Megan seemed satisfied with this, focusing on her ice cream. As we ate, old, painful memories surfaced, and I fought back tears. Sheila noticed, but didn't comment. Later, I read Megan a bedtime story, honored by the request. On the couch afterward, Sheila praised my handling of Megan's questions. She invited me to stay the night, with the understanding that I'd leave before Megan woke up. I agreed. We spent a deeply intimate night together. Despite my lingering reservations, being with Sheila felt like a second chance at love. Afterward, she checked on Megan, who was sound asleep, clutching her new teddy bear. I dressed quietly and left, grateful for how things were unfolding, hopeful for the future. Sheila was relaxing in my bed, while Megan was at a sleepover. She had the day off. I was at work. We'd spent the previous night and morning making love. We'd been together 8 months, and Sheila was deeply in love. I was fairly certain I felt the same way, and I anticipated a proposal any day. After getting out of bed and showering, Sheila started looking around my room. We usually stayed at her place because of Megan, so she wasn't here often. This was one of the few times she'd been here alone. The room was simple: small desk, filing cabinet, microwave, hot plate, queen-sized bed. She noticed a file box tucked in the corner of the closet. It piqued her curiosity, especially since it contained documents from before I'd moved to Texas, a period of my life I rarely discussed. Torn between respecting my privacy and wanting to know more about the man she planned to marry, Sheila decided to take a peek. Inside, she found my marriage certificate and divorce decree. Not surprising, but then she saw I had a daughter, April, now 22, which meant she'd been 14 at the time of the divorce. Sheila was stunned. I'd told her I didn't have any children. The rest of the paperwork seemed ordinary, but the revelation about April left her with unanswered questions. There was even a phone number for my ex-wife, Claire. Sheila carefully put everything back, unsure what to do. Maybe Gail, who'd known me for years, could shed some light on the situation. Sheila arrived at work early to talk to Gail, hoping to learn more about my past. Gail reacted with concern, advising her to leave it alone, trusting that I was a good man who would take care of her. Despite this advice, Sheila couldn't shake the feeling that she needed answers, especially now that she knew I had a daughter I'd never mentioned. Throughout the day, she couldn't stop thinking about it. When I came in for breakfast, she tried to act normal, but her mind was racing. After her shift, Sheila went home to think. The more she considered it, the more she realized she needed to understand why I'd left my daughter behind, particularly since she had a daughter of her own. Megan adored me, and I treated her like my own. But if I could abandon one child, could I do it again? She couldn't risk Megan's heart without knowing the truth. As Megan's mother, her well-being came first, even before her own happiness. Since neither Gail nor I would provide any answers, Sheila knew she had only one option: Claire. The phone displayed a private number. I'd grown accustomed to robocalls, but I still answered, clinging to the slim hope that it might be Andy. When the voice on the other end asked for Claire Gilmore, my married name, I almost hung up, assuming it was a telemarketer. But there was a hesitancy in the caller's voice that gave me pause. "My name is Sheila," the caller continued. "I'm dating your ex-husband, Andy." I froze, shocked, unable to process the unexpected news. For years, I'd rehearsed what I'd say if anyone ever contacted me about him. But now that it was happening, I was speechless. After a moment, I collected myself and continued the conversation. Sheila confirmed she was dating Andy and understood my surprise, acknowledging that I hadn't heard from him in 8 years. She said he was doing well, but wouldn't tell me where he was, sensing he wouldn't want her to. She admitted to snooping, explaining that Andy had never talked about his past. It stung to know he'd built a new life, even found a new girlfriend, yet still refused to acknowledge our shared history. "Of course," I replied. "I understand. I'm glad to hear he's doing well. He's a good man, Sheila. He didn't deserve what I did to him." "If you don't mind me asking, Claire, what exactly did you do to him?" Sheila asked gently. "I'm not surprised he didn't tell you. To put it briefly, we were together for over 20 years, married for 16, and I divorced him for his best friend. They'd known each other since 3rd grade. "Wow, that sounds awful when I say it like that." "Wow," Sheila echoed. "My husband did the same thing to me. He divorced me for my best friend," Sheila said. "Small world, isn't it? We weren't together as long as you and Andy, but that still doesn't explain why he left the way he did. People get divorced, even for reasons like yours, but they don't just abandon their kids. There's got to be more to it." "There is," I admitted, and explained what had led to Andy's departure. I don't think he saw it as abandoning April. In his mind, she abandoned him by choosing to live with Tom and me. He actually called her your daughter right after the hearing, and said he'd be gone in a week, but I didn't understand what he meant. I don't agree with what he did, but I understand it a little better now, Sheila admitted. I didn't want to stir things up, but I felt this might be my only chance to talk about it. "Sheila, I know you don't owe me anything, and this isn't really for me," I explained. "April's getting married soon. She's tried to cope with the fact that her father hasn't contacted her since she was 14. Not even a birthday card. Now, with the wedding approaching, she's devastated that he won't be there to walk her down the aisle. It's something she's dreamed of since she was little. If you have any influence with him, if you can do anything." Sheila remained calm, didn't overreact or hang up. She considered my request thoughtfully and responded with unexpected sensibility, especially considering she was the one currently in a relationship with Andy, the one with something to lose. "I understand what you're asking, Claire, but if I bring this up, he might leave, disappear again. He can get a job anywhere. He's not short on money. I wouldn't even know how to start this conversation, let alone convince him to come." "Of course, I understand. Maybe it's better to leave it alone. Sheila, thank you for calling. Please keep my number. I'd really appreciate occasional updates on how he's doing. It would mean a lot to know he's okay." "I'll keep your number, Claire," Sheila replied, "but I can't promise anything more than that. I hope you understand." I immediately called Tom at work. Did you get her contact info? Anything we can use? No, the number was blocked. She didn't give her last name, but maybe this is a start. Sheila ended the call, feeling both relieved and uncertain. She knew what she had to do, but the decision weighed heavily on her. Claire was right. She didn't owe them anything. Why risk her relationship with me for them? But it wasn't about them. It was about her and Megan. If she were in Claire and April's position, she'd want someone to help. She couldn't shake the fear that I might abandon Megan, just like I'd seemingly abandoned April. She needed to know if my past actions were a one-time thing or a pattern of behavior. She made a difficult decision, knowing it could cost her everything. I needed to confront my past, face April. If Sheila was going to trust me with Megan's heart, I had to address what I'd done, not bury it. The next day, Sheila called me again. I was surprised, but agreed to help. She asked for April's number, promising not to reveal my location. I understood and gave her the number. After preparing April for the call, Sheila nervously dialed, ready to speak to my daughter for the first time. "Good afternoon. This is April Gilmore." "April, this is Sheila, your mother." She explained what's going on. "Yes, and she made it clear that anything you tell me about my dad stays between us." "I'm sorry it has to be like this, April, but I understand. I'm ready to do whatever you need. You need to fly to Austin. I'll pick you up and take you to your dad. You can stay with me while you're here, and we'll just see what happens." "Can I ask you something?" April inquired. "Why are you risking your relationship for me? You don't even know me." "That's a fair question, April," Sheila replied. "I was in your shoes once, and my daughter is in your position now. Just a girl who wants her father in her life. Some things are too important to ignore. I need to know the man I'm planning to marry, and I want him to make things right with you." While we spoke, April booked a flight to Austin for the next day. She emailed me the itinerary. I would pick her up myself. Now, all I had to do was wait. Exhausted from work, I was pleasantly surprised to find Sheila waiting for me at home, completely naked. I pulled her into my arms, kissing her deeply, forgetting everything else. We spent an incredible night together, reaching a new level of intimacy when she offered me her anus for the first time. I briefly wondered what had prompted this, but decided not to question it. My love for Sheila was overwhelming, stronger than anything I'd ever felt, even with Claire. It made me understand, in a way, why Claire had made her choice, though it didn't excuse the betrayal. I dropped Sheila off at her apartment, the engagement ring burning a hole in my pocket. I was almost ready to propose, but I wanted the moment to be perfect. As she closed the door, her expression seemed bittersweet. I hoped everything was all right. After dropping Megan off at school, Sheila drove to the airport to meet April. Holding a sign with April's name, she scanned the arriving passengers. Despite the crowd, I recognized April instantly. She smiled and walked toward me. We exchanged pleasantries, and she mentioned how eager she was to see her father after 8 years. We drove to Marble Falls, the small town where Andy and I had lived. Before reaching town, I called Rosie, Andy's dispatcher, to find out his location. "He's at Beals, on 4th and Main," she told me, then joked about a previous encounter in the back of Andy's truck, making me blush. April teased me gently as we approached the department store. I spotted Andy's truck and told April to wait a short distance away while I positioned myself near the driver's side door. 20 minutes later, we heard Andy's voice, signaling the moment they'd both been waiting for. After fixing the electrical problem in the restroom, I headed out to finish my last 2 calls before returning to Sheila and Megan. I'd been carrying the ring, waiting for the right moment to propose, though I knew I might have to create that opportunity soon. Walking toward my truck, I saw Sheila's car parked behind it. She was standing near the door. I reached for the ring box, thinking this was the moment. Then I saw her, with April. Seeing my daughter brought a flood of emotions: the sting of betrayal, fear of what her sudden appearance meant, anger at Sheila for orchestrating this. I greeted April flatly, then turned to Sheila, realizing she must have uncovered my past and arranged this meeting. Trying to suppress my emotions, I mumbled something about needing to get back to work, put my tools in the truck, and prepared to leave. "Daddy, I'm getting married." "Is that so?" I replied. "Congratulations." I paused, unable to contain my bitterness. "Try not to become a cheating whore like your mother." I climbed into the truck and slammed the door. It wasn't over. April was at my window, banging on the glass. "I saw you. I know you still love me and care. I saw you," she yelled. I rolled down the window. "What are you talking about, April?" "My high school graduation. You were in the back trying not to be seen. But it was you. That's how I know you still love me." "I don't know what you think you saw, April, but it sure as hell wasn't me." I started the engine and drove off. "Damn it. Should have gotten rid of that stuff," I muttered. I'd been trying to be cautious, holding on to a few things, just in case. Now my old life was back to haunt me. Clearly, once wasn't enough. I drove for 10 minutes before pulling over, trying to collect my thoughts. How could Sheila do this to me? I was happy, damn it. After all these years, I'd finally found love, contentment. I should have known it wouldn't last. Happiness wasn't meant for me. I wouldn't make that mistake again. Everyone who'd ever entered my life had betrayed me. Why would this time be different? I got back on the road, heading to my next job. I'd finish my calls, then tell my boss I was moving on. He'd understand. April was crying on Sheila's shoulder. Sheila was stunned by my coldness. This was my own child. What April had done wasn't that terrible. Kids make those choices all the time. This was clearly about my unresolved pain. I'd always been loving toward Megan and Sheila. This behavior was so unlike me. Sheila helped April into her car. "You can stay with me for now," she said, trying to reassure her, though she wasn't sure what to do herself. This was just a first attempt. I'll talk to him again after work. When I returned to the boarding house after 6:30 p.m., Sheila and April weren't there. It was a relief in a way. It made leaving easier. I loved Sheila and Megan, but after what she'd done, bringing April back into my life, I felt betrayed. Now that my past had resurfaced, I couldn't trust her. I started packing, knowing I'd be leaving everything at Sheila's behind. I ignored a knock on the door and continued packing. When the door opened, I knew it was Sheila. She leaned against the wall, watching me silently before asking why I was leaving again. She admitted to talking to Claire, learning everything. "The same thing happened to me, Andy," she said. But he left it alone, moved on with his life. I lashed out. "Our situations aren't the same. Your betrayal wasn't like mine. Not after 20 years of marriage, a daughter choosing them over me." Years of buried pain surfaced. My mother cheating on my father, then abandoning me. My father's suicide. The abuse from my stepfather. The scars on my back a constant reminder of neglect and violence. "Why did you have to dig this up, Sheila? I was finally happy. I had you and Megan. I worked so hard to leave all that behind. They're nothing to me anymore, just ghosts." I'd been looking, fast forward to the present, and Sheila had unearthed this whole mess again. Why couldn't she just let sleeping dogs lie? It had nothing to do with her, and nothing to do with Megan. Weren't we content? Sheila attempted to clarify that her discovery about April had spurred her need to understand my reasons for leaving her. I finally grasped her concern. If I could abandon my own daughter, I could just as easily leave Megan. It was evident in her gaze, and the realization stung. A fresh betrayal by the one person I thought I could rely on. This new wave of resentment infuriated me. I snapped, telling Sheila if she lacked that much trust, I'd spare her the worry and be gone by sunrise. I was through destroying lives. I told her to join the ranks of those who'd hurt me, and that once I was gone, she could cozy up to my daughter and the rest of the backstabbers. Perhaps they'd concoct some new torments, but I wouldn't be around to endure them. I believed I'd made my point, but I'd only succeeded in angering her. As I stood there glaring at her, I understood that I might have just alienated the one positive thing remaining in my life, Sheila. I had reached my breaking point with Andy's self-pity and resentment. My love for him ran deep, but I couldn't endure watching him dismantle everything we'd built. He behaved as if the world was conspiring against him, but the truth was far different. His daughter had upended her life to see him because of her love and desire to have him in it. She wanted him to escort her down the aisle and meet his future grandchildren. Even his ex-wife, whom he believed despised him, was merely attempting to help their daughter find peace. If Andy chose to remain trapped in his negativity, that was his prerogative, but I wouldn't stay with someone incapable of moving on. I confessed my fear of him abandoning Megan and me, especially after learning he'd done it before. But I was ready to understand, had he only trusted me enough to discuss it. Relationships thrive on trust, and I had shared my whole self with him, even the parts I wasn't proud of. I did so because I believed in us and desired his care, not out of dependence, but out of love. I flung his key at him, striking him square in the chest. He didn't flinch, which only intensified my fury. I told him he was free to go, to revert to merely existing as he had for 7 years, instead of truly living as he had with Megan and me for the past 8 months. If that was his preference, so be it. But I craved more, and I had hoped to find it with him. Without a backward glance, I stormed out, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the entire building. As much as I wished for him to pursue me, to plead with me to stay, I meant every word. I couldn't coexist with someone who refused to release the past and embrace the love we shared. As Sheila slammed the door, it struck me that I'd been wrong to shield myself from the agony of betrayal. I had pushed away the people I cherished. I didn't want to lose Sheila and Megan, and the prospect of reconnecting with April also lingered. However, I knew I had considerable damage to repair. I stopped packing and raced to Sheila's. Seeing her car parked outside affirmed my need to rectify things. I knelt at her door, preparing to apologize when she opened it before I could knock. I confessed my errors, declared my need for her, and pleaded for forgiveness, vowing to do whatever necessary. Sheila granted my request, but on one condition. I had to mend my relationship with April. I readily agreed, grateful for a second opportunity. Inside, April sat on the couch, tear-streaked. I knelt before her, holding her hands, overwhelmed with emotion. I apologized for allowing my anger and hurt to cloud my judgment. I explained how I perceived her decision to reside with her mother as a betrayal, driving me away. Thanks to Sheila, I finally recognized my error and sought her forgiveness. April forgave me, stating she'd never felt anger, only sadness. She wished I'd spoken to her before leaving, but understood the pain her mother's actions had caused. We embraced, attempting to reclaim the lost years. Noticing Sheila's tears, April drew her into the hug, and we shared a poignant moment together. After inquiring about Megan, Sheila brought her in, and I reminded her of my promise to become her new dad. She remembered, and I instructed her to watch closely. Back in the living room, I helped Sheila to her feet, thanked her for reuniting me with April, and proposed. She accepted, and we kissed, with April and Megan looking on. April corrected me when I referred to them as stepsisters, insisting they would simply be sisters. We celebrated with dinner and arranged a courthouse wedding for that very evening. I began moving into Sheila's apartment. At the wedding, I felt dapper in my tuxedo, while Sheila, her pregnancy just becoming noticeable, looked radiant in her pink dress. April resembled a princess, and Benjamin was delighted to see her walk down the aisle with me. I had successfully avoided Claire and Tom, catching only fleeting glimpses during the preparations and rehearsal. Claire had gained considerable weight, now well over 200 kilograms. She'd once remarked that life with Tom made her fat and happy. Whether true happiness was hers, I didn't know, but the weight gain was evident, and I wondered if guilt played a part. As Sheila and I conversed with some of Benjamin's relatives, I was oblivious to Claire and Tom's approach from behind. Claire's voice, once angelic now, the sound of Claire's voice grated on me. Any lingering affection I'd held for her had long since dissipated, though for April's sake, I attempted civility. I saw Tom start to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Tom, Do you recall the last thing I said to you? Not if I remember, he lied. I nodded. My sentiments haven't changed. Sheila, sensing the tension, steered Tom away, leaving Claire and me alone for the first time in years. Once they were gone, Claire and I stood in silence. I could have lived the rest of my life without exchanging another word with her, but that clearly wasn't possible. She broke the silence, expressing surprise that after all this time, the animosity remained. She'd hoped we could move past it, perhaps even become friends, given that we'd all seemingly found happiness in our new lives. She acknowledged Sheila and my contentment, including my role as Megan's father, something she'd learned recently. I made it clear that her hopes for reconciliation were misplaced. The intense love I'd once felt had transformed into profound hatred for both her and Tom. When she asked why I couldn't let go, I explained, beginning with the painful truth of my past. My mother had repeatedly been unfaithful to my father before leaving him for another man. My devastated father had taken his own life, a fact I'd concealed out of shame. This background, however, wasn't the core issue. The true pain stemmed from the betrayal by the three people I'd loved most: Claire, April, and Tom. I had built my life around them, believing we would grow old together. Their actions shattered those dreams. Claire admitted she'd loved me, but not with the same intensity, something beyond her control. But for me, the betrayal wasn't merely about the loss of a romantic connection. It was the destruction of trust, the sense of betrayal that two of the people I'd relied on most had conspired to tear apart everything I knew. "Andy, we didn't mean for it to happen," she said. "You didn't stop it either. You just went after what you wanted, ignoring the consequences. Do you even comprehend how difficult it was for me to consider trusting another woman after what you did? Losing you and Tom wasn't enough. You took April too. April made that choice on her own. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't influence her to stay with you. I know what you said. It'll be strange with Tom here instead of Daddy, but at least I'll still be here after school, and you can see your dad whenever possible. Tell me that didn't happen." Claire couldn't deny it, and I knew she wouldn't. "You wanted it all, didn't you? Your selfishness destroyed someone who loved and supported you for 16 years. Did you ever consider how that would affect me? Did you ever suggest to April that perhaps she should live with me, so I wouldn't be left completely alone?" "You're right, Andy. I didn't think of it like that. But you disappeared without a word. What did you expect me to do? My whole family was gone. I was left alone while my wife and daughter lived with the man who replaced me. Did you think I could stay there and watch my life move on without me, only seeing my daughter a few days a month? I had two choices: sever all ties or end my life. And honestly, I was close to choosing the latter. When I told Mrs. Perrine I'd see you in hell, I meant it. I even had the gun." Claire, shocked, said, "God, Andy, I had no idea." "Of course you didn't. You were too preoccupied with your new life to care. You replaced me, convinced April to stay with you, and never once checked on me after the hearing. I told you I'd be gone in a week. I didn't just mean out of the house. I meant dead. You didn't even ask what I meant. I didn't kill myself because I hated you and Tom too much to give you the satisfaction." "Andy, I cut her off. I let my anger cloud my judgment with April. When she chose to live with you, I assumed she had chosen your side and wanted Tom as her father. I overreacted by leaving without a word. That cost me 8 years I can never get back. Thankfully, Sheila pulled me out of that spiral, or who knows how much more I would have lost. Now I know what it's like to have someone who actually cares about me. Do you understand why I still hate you?" "I get it, Andy," she admitted. "I hoped time would heal things, but it hasn't. I'm sorry for how we handled it. Can we at least be civil? We share a daughter. I'll treat you like any stranger, but ensure Tom, or Mom, never speaks to me again, or you'll be a widow." Over the next 2 years, I gradually bought out my boss as he retired, becoming the largest electrical contractor in Marble Falls and one of the biggest in Central Texas. While I still occasionally went on calls, I mostly manage the business from the office with my wife, Sheila, and 10-year-old daughter, Megan, on staff. Sheila handled appointments, I managed staff and projects, and we tackled the paperwork together. Megan adored her new baby sister, Katie, born a year after our wedding. Benjamin received a promotion to Dallas, about 4 hours away, but we still see them monthly. They're expecting my first grandchild next year. Nothing terrible befell Tom and Claire, aside from their significant weight gain. While I don't care to hear about them, April keeps Sheila updated, and Sheila occasionally shares. Sheila doesn't harbor resentment like I do. She even sends them a thank you card on our anniversary, stating their actions brought us together.